Hi, I'm Introved, and today it's time for another book review. I have read, I think, four, five of them already, and they belong to different genres. So there's something for each one of you, I'm sure. So the first book I want to talk about is How to Get Rich by Dennis Felix. I already uploaded a short or a reel on based on it. So the major takeaways have already been shared. So here is a guy who is a multi billionaire and he has made it big. And obviously, this book is not just a simple manual on how to actually get rich, because it depends on what you want to pursue in life, what you want to do, and how you intend to make the money. But yes, he definitely talks about the attitude and the aptitude, if I may say so, because it requires a certain amount of risk taking ability. So he says upfront that people who want comfort and who want a fixed salary every month and who don't have the capacity to take risks, they'll never be rich. So he himself admits that he, in his time, hired so many talented people who were way smarter than he was, and they could have built and bigger empires than what he was able to achieve. But then they were the ones who lacked this kind of attitude and aptitude for business. So they were happy to work for him. So there are certain pointers he definitely gives through his book. So one was this one, which I've just shared, and the second one is that once you build whatever you have to ensure that you are the major owner of that company. So even if it has a board of directors, you have to ensure that the reins are in your hands. So do not give up your ownership. He says that you should not be afraid of making mistakes, and failures are also part of the whole deal. And they teach you a number of things, all said and done. So he himself also shares, quite a few anecdotes about his own personal life, that how getting rich, too soon really got to his head and where he went wrong. And sometimes when he cracked certain deals, I mean, what he should have done or could have done. So there are a few pointers out there to understand, comprehend. But then he says that you have to be shameless about the pursuit of wealth, and you should not shy away from any kind of ambition, no matter how big. But then he's on the whole against a lot of planning, a lot of thinking in advance, because he says that that can possibly paralyze you, and you might not take any step in the right direction towards your ambitions at the end of the day, which made a lot of sense. So, if you want to know more about this book, you can probably watch the short or the reel that I shared earlier on YouTube and Instagram both. And the overall tone of the book, I would say, yes, it was very pompous. But then he's a successful man, so I'll forgive him that. I mean, he can afford to be pompous because, after all, he came out to be successful and he made it big. So he probably deserved it. The second book I would like to talk about is Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts. Now, this is a very deep book. I don't think there'll be many takers for this one because it answers all kinds of metaphysical questions that you might have about life, reincarnation, the ideas of heaven and hell, and soul, and how it exists in our body. Honestly speaking, I was not really blown away by what the book had to say. Reason being that I've already read a lot about all of these, metaphysical questions. I've already explored all of that. So I knew most of the content. What was surprising, however, let me share a few points here with you, was how we dwell in our bodies. I thought there's just one soul, one body, but although people keep talking about soulmate and twin soul, I thought that okay, maybe the soul can divide it itself into two bits and then exist in two bodies, but it's not like that. The soul can exist in multiple bodies at the same time. And by the way, time and space continuously, they keep on reminding, the way we look at it, like time is linear, it doesn't exist that way. So there is no concept of time. So I mean, in a nutshell, let me just say that whatever is happening right now has already happened according to them and will happen at the same time. So this is how it works. And then another thing, very interesting thing I read about in the book was about South Pole and North Pole. So once upon a time, rather two, three times in the past, they have interchanged their position. So what we know as North Pole now was South Pole and vice versa. The third interesting thing that I came across was about certain civilizations. If anybody has ever read about any of this kind of stuff, then they would know about Atlantis as a continent. So this one talks about Lemuria. So they had mastered, uh, the way to harness the energy of sound, so much so that they could create things, construct things out of sound. And their paintings and art was also like not just three dimensional, but you could just hear the sound, visualize it, and do a lot more than what we can even possibly imagine at this point of time. So they were way ahead of their times. The only problem with that civilization was that they did not want to mix with the others. They were very shy and they were introverts of sorts. So they wanted to keep themselves to themselves. They didn't want to mingle. So they have given particular directions and places also where this continent earlier existed and this civilization prospered. Somewhere around Spain is what I remember. Now, Set is basically an entity, and Jane Roberts is basically an author, but then she was able to channel and serve as a medium for this entity. So this entity would enter in Jane Roberts and call her Rupert. They had a past life connection of some sorts, and they were friends at some point of time. And this entity spoke through Jane Roberts. And during that entire time, Jane Roberts would not know what she said, what she did, what she spoke. Everything was recorded by her husband, and this is how so much material, if you Google it, you'll find it. Seth Speaks is all the material, the transcripts of whatever was recorded. As per their sessions that they conducted with people, they used to conduct seances in their home. So whatever was recorded during those seances is available as Set material. Seth Speaks is literally the book that Seth dictated through Jane Roberts, and the husband took notes, and they just got it published. And there are more books available on the topic. Now, although it sounds very interesting when I talk about it like this, just like my family members, they enjoy it when I tell them all of this stuff, but they would not sit with this actual book and go through it, because it can be very boring and it can be very heavy at times. But even if you have doubts about whether this entity is real or not, what I need to say is that the ideas expressed in them are pretty much consistent through and through. Like, the conversation is very intelligent, they don't make mistakes, they don't budge. So that way, I mean, I find it convincing enough. And when I compare it with the other books that I have read on similar subjects and topics, then I would say that it resonates, because there are some common points, for example, about heaven and hell, which don't exist. But then it all depends on our perception of how we perceive things. So near death experiences also describe their people's own perceptions, about heaven and hell, and where they finally end up, and that is how they describe stuff. One very cute incident which I want to share from this is that, how they sometimes, because Seth is also a master and a teacher, and he's there to teach people on the earth and to remind them of who they are and of their legacy. So he said that sometimes we have to entertain people and do things according to how they want things to play out. For example, there was this Arab gentleman who always felt, and he felt very guilty about it, that Allah is not as strong as Moses. So he always had this notion in his head that when Allah and Moses will have to have a fight, for his soul, and Moses will definitely win. So then Seth says that at that point of time, he and another guardian angel, he had to request that angel to perform this whole drama for the comfort and sanity of this man after his death, for his soul. so that he would be at peace. So I found that really cute and I thought I'll share it with you. So those who are up for this kind of heavy reading and who would like to get some answers on these metaphysical questions can definitely check out this book. The next three books that I'm going to talk about are fiction. I thought it had been really long. Let me dive back into something interesting. So I was just browsing when I came across this very interesting looking book, and it's called The Graveyard Apartment by, let me read the name, Mariko Koike. So this also I read online, and I have a soft copy of it, but then it's a Japanese author, and the book that I read was obviously a translation in English. So I mean, throughout the book, I felt as if I was just watching a movie. Non readers will find it difficult to understand, but the kind of imagination reading such a book requires is next level, and that is why reading is recommended because it enhances your creativity and imagination both. So, then what happens is the basic premise of this book is, first of all, the cover is very interesting, as you must have seen by now. So what happens is that they build this set of apartments, 8 apartments basically, and it's just one building. And this building overlooks a huge graveyard, a Buddhist temple, and a crematorium. So people are reluctant to buy it, but then they're obviously being offered at cheaper rates. So those who can't afford better housing anywhere else, they choose to move into those apartments. Initially there are 5-6 families, and the main family is basically comprises husband, wife, and a kid, along with a pet dog and a pet bird, a finch, which by the way dies on the very first night inside the cage under mysterious circumstances. The little girl claims that the finch comes every night even after its death to talk to her and tell her things. So what is so spooky about this whole thing is, first of all, the view. Initially it's all sunny and all, but gradually, they paint a picture wherein you feel really spooked, especially by the fact that the basement, I mean, the only way in and out of the basement is through the elevator, and that malfunctions many a times. So what's there in the basement? What makes people go there? Because there are storage units assigned to them. And once upon a time, there had been some talk about removing the bodies, exhuming them out of their graves, and shifting them elsewhere. But then people were very reluctant, and it could not happen. And the plan was to build an underground road and build a shopping arcade of sorts, which would be connected directly with the apartments across the cemetery. So what they heard and found out was that the road was already half dug, but then it was probably filled up, but nobody was very sure. So the connection is that somehow this dug up road is how the spirits came into the basement and all. There is no very graphic description of the spirits as such, but the atmosphere that is created through and through is very spooky. And towards the fag end, what happens is that all the families start moving out, and the last family to go out, I mean, there isn't a happy ending about it. So if you are interested, you can read and find out what happens next. But then, I mean, I really appreciate this book, because I was wondering, like, if it's horror, then how convincing would it be, and how would it manage to spook me? But then it really did its job. So I really enjoyed reading this book, and it's a short read, not a very huge book. The next book that I read was The House Next Door. This was one of the books which was really talked about, so I thought, let me see what the hype is all about. Now this is by Anne Rivers Siddons. So it's a thriller, that's the genre now, and mixed with a little bit of horror also, I believe, because there are some elements in there which were never explained in the book. So obviously it centers around a house which is newly built, by the way, and that is rare. Normally what happens is that there is already a bungalow, already an old house, an ancient mansion where things happen and it's haunted, and unfortunate stuff happens in that house, series of unfortunate accidents and stuff like that. But then here, this house is newly built, and it's a quiet street, and all the people are very urbane and sophisticated and genteel, and this is where a family moves. So this is, I mean, 3 families move in there, and none of them have a happy ending. So there are things that happen one after the other. So much so that it was a fag, and this couple, the protagonists, they decide to burn the house down. But then at the last moment, they figure out that it's not the house, there's something else that has sparked the whole thing. And what they do about it, so that is something mind blowing. So this is what you can read about. So it if it's a thriller, I mean, it managed to thrill me enough, so I enjoyed reading it. Last but not the least for the day is The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. Initially, I thought Ira would be a woman, but it turned out to be a man. So, how do I categorize this? First of all, the genre. I mean, it was a teeny tiny book. I finished it within a few hours only. This is a mix of thriller and horror, personally, to me, because as I started reading this book, I mean, I suddenly was recalled of a movie I had seen on similar lines. So what happens is that this is like the setting, if I talk about it, it's in New York in the time of year of 1970s or thereabouts, when women had started acting up according to the men. So things were going on very smooth as usual. Throughout the world, it has been a patriarchal concept of society everywhere. I mean, irrespective of which country or nation you talk about. So it was like that in America also. Women looked after their households, even if they did their jobs. Then also, the children in housework was always their responsibility. So then, at this particular time, women had started questioning their roles in the society. They had started asking for their rights. They would have their clubs and meet frequently, and they had started thinking, basically, which was very dangerous to the men. So what happens is that there is a small family with two kids and a husband and wife, and they move into a place called the Stepford. So this is a small town, a quiet town. Taxes are low, it's not very crowded, and they get a nice house over there, and in a reasonable price, of course. And then they settle down. The protagonist basically befriends another lady. So they were not typical housewives, they did something or the other, and they hated housework, and they shared similar interests. I mean, they were lively women, basically, who had interests other than their own immediate family and looking after their husband and kids. So that was the fault in them, if you may say so. Now, their husbands also were very liberated men. They were not conservative like other men. So they were also okay with their wives. But then when they move away over here, they try to get together a club of women, tried their best to ensure that the women garner some interest outside their homes, but then they were shocked because all the women were immaculately dressed, attired all the time. They were constantly doing housework and with a smile on their faces. They said the right things, but they were like basically robots. And robots who looked like humans, who performed like humans, but then at the end of the day, they had no personality of their own. They would never utter a wrong word, they would never do anything untoward. So they seemed very unnatural to the protagonist and her friend. And shocking was that eventually the other women, this friend also changed overnight, and she was terrified for her life. So she tries to run away from there, but then obviously she's not successful, and at the end she also turns into a typical Stepford wife. This all happens because of this men's club that exists. So there are all kinds of brilliant men out there, engineers, scientists, and you name it. And she has a doubt all along that they have a hand in it, and somehow they are the ones who are turning women into these robots. But then, before she could do anything concrete about it, or before she could leave the place, she also was turned into one of these robots. So, in the movie, I remember there was some kind of procedure that was shown. I mean, how they did that, but in the book, I mean, nothing was as such written or mentioned on how they were accomplishing all of that. So basically, men were very happy with these kind of wives who performed well in every arena. They took care of the house, and they were immaculately dressed, and they had good figures, and so basically they were very tamed and very docile. So every man's dream, I believe. So yeah, so that's why I said it was a thriller, as it was terrifying to see how these lively women were converted into robots, and the mystery behind it that is never solved. So I really enjoyed reading this one also. So I have talked about three books which were fiction, one book which talks about metaphysical stuff, and another which was self-help book, how to get rich. So you take your pick. If you're not interested in reading books, then at least share this video with somebody who is a reader. So I hope you enjoyed this not so brief book review. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel for more of such stimulating content, whether they are book reviews or some kind of discussion on a social topic or so, or whatever is trending at the time, or everything in between. Thanks for watching. Take care and catch you soon.